welcome back to the Masters of Modern. I'm your host, Alex Kessler, and I'm on my own today. This is a lonesome episode. I'm all alone, but all of our different viewership has been asking for a long time for us to do some more deck tech-based focuses. So this is going to be 6 deck techs. I'm going to look at 6 different deck lists that I have here, all modern focused. All of these have been posted on the internet, and I've thought they were interesting, so I've been saving them, and I just kind of have pocketed a few deck lists, and so I wanted to talk about them, and I figured now's a perfect opportunity to do so. A lot of them are using newer cards from Dominaria United, but some of them are just doing new stuff in the modern metagame, and I think it's time to talk about it. Now, I do have some things that we need to talk to everyone about. First off is we have launched the backer kit for Drop.D20 Dice. That is the Kickstarter we did last month. There was a big announcement there that I haven't confirmed yet as of the time of recording, so I can't promise what's going on. But we're trying to get more colors unlocked, so make sure to check that out on the Kickstarter, kickstarter.com for Drop.D20. I'll also be posting on Twitter, Twitter at Kess Wiley, because I think people really like the colors, and I think our factories are able to figure it out. So we're negotiating it, and hopefully that's true. Beyond that, thank you to our sponsors, TCG Player. If you use our affiliate link below before you buy anything, it does help the podcast out. We're also on channelfireball.com and tcgplayer.com. They're combining, so we're figuring out exactly how that works, but it's really exciting. And then also at the end of this month, we're going to Magic 30 and Magic Summit. Magic 30, I'll be there. That's sold out, so hopefully I'll see people there. For Magic Summit, if you use the code KESS, KESS, when you were to check out, if you are thinking you're going on the edge, we will be there. We'll be doing a bunch of awesome stuff. Ben will be there as well. And it's going to be hyped. They're both going to be really cool. We're pretty excited in general. So with that being said, let's jump into the episode. And today we're talking deck lists. So as I said earlier, we're looking at different deck lists that we're talking about. One thing that has been interesting as a conversation before we get into these is bannings. So right now the format has become really 5-color focused. I tweeted the other day how if you were to look at like the classic old school Magic the Gathering mechanics that are beloved, flashback, domain, kicker, cycling, threshold, etc. A lot of them I love. Flashback and madness being, I think, 2 of my favorite, including actually I'm also a big fan of Morph and Cons and Innistrad are 2 of my favorite sets of all time. But I think my least favorite's Domain, and I think it's because Magic is worse the more colors. Like anything 4 and 5 color Magic is just a worse experience than when the game is focusing on 1, 2, and 3 colors. And in Modern recently, it's just become too easy to play 5 color. And I think there's a few features to that. One of them, I think, is that Ren and 6 is just like able to mitigate mana flood too easily. By being able to rebuy lands, you're able to just get more lands you need. That, in concordance with Triomes, allows you to hit the mana you need. I think on top of that, just Yorion decks in general have kind of encouraged this like 5-color style play style. And so I do think that we're getting to a point where it'd be really interesting to me for us to start attacking that. If we're looking at ban list conversations, I know people talk about Ragavan always, but I honestly don't think those cards bother me as much as just how 5-color the format has become. So that's definitely one of the things I would love to talk towards kind of mitigating. Yeah, I think the fact that this format has moved to 5 colors so easily is something that would be interesting to deal with. And banning Yorion or Ren and 6, I think, help Yorion, allowing you to have these decks that are it adds like about, I think we did the math. I think Yorion decks add a total of like $200 on average to the format alone. Like there's so many of them. They're such a large part of the format. They're way more expensive, right? Like a Yorion deck is about $1,000 more than a regular 75 with sideboard card deck. But because there's so many of them and that amount of difference, just every other deck that does well in the format might as well cost $200 more because of that uplifting. Like the average price is so weighted towards Yorion decks that it's hurting the format, I think. And then beyond that, just they encourage you to play with a bunch of good stuff, big piles, which then like allows you to play with more loose mana or more 5-color mana bases. That added to the new, there's the new white domain removal spell that I think is also like leaning things in different directions that I don't love. I think the other way to fix it is to add stuff like Price of Progress or Wasteland to Modern. And I think Wasteland's a really interesting one. I think I asked the internet earlier, like, why is Legacy not dominated by these 5-color decks when Modern is so much? And part of it, I think, is the fact that there are more decks that punish you for being those clunkier mana bases. In Modern, the combo kill potential is lower, but there could be the potential to add something like Wasteland to the format. Wrenn and 6 would have to be banned. I don't think Wrenn and 6 being in the format, honestly, will survive very long. I think like in both versions of this conversation, it was being looked at as like a real issue. And I don't think anyone's like looking for Wrenn and 6 to be a healthy part of the format. Even as a Jund player myself who loves like and has a playset of Wrenn and 6s, like this will hurt me directly financially. I think Wrenn and 6 is maybe too powerful. I think it misses the mark just a little bit, and finding ways to mitigate that are probably better for the format than keeping it around. The other one that's a little weird is I do think that just like the Cascade decks have escalated to an extent that I don't know if it's healthy for the format. The fact that, there's like 4 different decks that'll have basically the same play pattern of here's all these really good adventure cards or whatever cards or fire and ice that work, and then Cascade can work. One thing someone pointed out is that double face cards should go back, should have another rules rework, and this would mitigate fire and ice from functioning the way it does, which is like a little bit of a nerf. But basically that when they cascade, they can cascade into spells, but they can only cast this parts of the spell that cost less than the cascade spell. So if you cascade into fire ice, you have to choose fire and or ice. But you do hit fire and ice. And or if you were to cascade into boom bust, you now do hit it, but you have to cast boom. You don't have the option of audibling into bust. I think that's a really interesting way to hurt those decks. But I don't know. I think I don't think those are the focus right now, though. I think in the long run, the play pattern is pretty unhealthy. So yeah, but let's talk some deck lists. So the first deck list we're going to be talking today is Micro Spell Seeker. This was a list that was tweeted by Zenoan. He had some pretty sick tech here. And basically, it's a list based on Micromancer. Micromancer is a 3 and a blue creature that lets you find a instant or sorcery that costs 1 or less. And so it's using that alongside Ephemerate to find Ephemerate once you cast it. Then once you cast it, you can cast Ephemerate to blink Micromancer. The first time it enters play, you can use it to find Spoils of the Vault. And the second time it hits play, you can find Angel's Grace. And it uses that with the card Step Through. So Step Through is a sorcery 3 blue that allows you to return target creature to their owner's hand. Return 2 target creatures to their owner's hand. But it also has wizard cycling. So for 2 mana and instant speed, you can discard it to search for any wizard. You use that most of the time to find Micromancer, though it also has stuff like Urtai as a removal or counter spell or bounce spell, and Meddling Mage to protect your combo. And then it uses that to just do fun stuff with Micromancer. It uses Teferi and Solitude and a bunch of really good white cards to be able to play just a general control deck strategy at instant speed. And then once you get Micromancer into play, as soon as you can cast it, preferably at instant speed with Teferi Time Raveler, you're able to kind of combo off and do the win. It uses Thassa's Oracle as the other piece to be able to, that's how it wins when, your deck is empty. For those who don't know, Spoils of the Vault, I'll pull that up over here. Spoils of the Vault is black, instant, name a card, reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal the named card, then put that card in your hand, remove all other cards revealed this way from the game, and you lose 1 life for each card removed. So this works with Angel's Grace to do the Tainted Pact combo environment. And you need to find Thassa's Oracle somehow to be able to pull this off. You have Step Through to do so. And that's the way you win the game, is basically the gist of it. This list is so sick. Like, I love, like, hey, it's playing you have Silence, you have different removal spells as like a control thing. You have stuff like Cling to Dust to be able to protect yourself. You have so many different cool little targets you could find with Micromancer as a toolbox package. There's the combo, Teferi Time Raveler being able to let you do the Micromancer thing. Instant speed does have vibes of Splinter Twin, where you cast your 3 mana spell and then you untap, and then on your opponent's turn, you're able to interact with Micromancer. Micromancer also being able to cast that with Flash lets you play so funnily with all of the 1-drop spells you're able to find, being able to go find the specific removal spell you need to be able to interact. And just gives you really, really cool combo finish wins. Some other cool things that it's doing is it's taking advantage of the clone creature rare land from Zendikar that is a land on the backside that can also copy Micromancer. It has Riptide Laboratory, so you can keep rebuying your Micromancer. And it's playing stuff like Snapcaster Mage to let you like rebuy the spoils of the vault if you needed to use it to go get Thassa's Oracle instead, or find the specific tutor piece you need to win the game. And really, but it's the combo of Spoils of the Vault and Angel's Grace and being able to guaranteed find those with a Micromancer and Ephemerate that makes this deck so powerful. I think from the sideboard, you have a bunch of different just like generically good stuff that helps, stuff like Teferi Mage, the original Teferi, which also lets you do cool things with the Micromancers. So the deck designer Xenowan at Xenowan kind of walks it through as well, which basically the deck's real game plan. Once you get Micromancer into play, you can get Ephemerate, and from that point on, you can use Ephemerate alongside Micromancer to just value out your opponent until you're able to draw a step through. And once you have step through with Micromancer and an Ephemerate, you can use it to search for Thassa's Oracle, and then you do the combo, right? So that's really the two pieces you need together. But it's such a great value engine that you're able to grind your opponents out. So this deck is really cool. I definitely think it's worth trying out. I also think it's relatively, other than the 4-time Solitudes, which I think are also probably replaceable, it's a pretty inexpensive list. Almost all of these cards are not that hard to get your hands on. So I think the mana base is currently just damn a bunch of fetch lands with the one thing that is expensive is there are 2 Cavernous Souls because it is a wizard tribal deck in some ways, but I think there's probably cool ways to play around with this deck to even lean more into the Micromancer control strategy, add some counter magic that 1 mana, or do some other fun things. Definitely would try this out, and make sure to tweet at Xenowan if you want any questions specifically of how he's doing or any changes he's made to the deck since then, because it is really fire. All right, next list. So it ends up that a player was able to hit second place in a modern challenge with merfolk. And actually, one of the surprising things going through the most recent tournaments over the last week was how often we found merfolk decks just top 8ing or even top 2ing. I think this deck really does have legs and is the one that, of the decks I'm going over, has the widest chance of just being a success story. Obviously, the addition to the deck is Vidalin Hexcatcher. This is a Merfolk Wizards 1 blue 1/1 from Dominaria. It has flash. Other Merfolk you control get +1/+1, and then you can sacrifice any Merfolk to counter target non-creature spell unless its controller has 1. It just does so many things all in one card that it's almost not surprising that it's been able to do this much in the deck. And basically, for those who don't know, Merfolk decks are a style of deck based on the main, or arguably main, creature type for that represents blue in Magic the Gathering. And so that's merfolk, merman, mermaid-esque characters. The way the deck functions normally is almost as a tempo style beatdown deck. So there's just a large list of 2 mana merfolk lords. So basically 2 mana creatures, merfolk, that give all of their merfolk +1/+1. And they have different adjacent abilities. A lot of them give island walk, so it allows your opponent's lands, if they're islands, to be able to be attacked while not being blocked. And then it also, a lot of them just, have other abilities like this one. There's one that untaps every time you play a card. So, and then just you're playing really efficient beaters and you're able to punish people playing blue mana, which we mentioned before this podcast. Right now, the mana bases in Modern are becoming so 5 color that almost guaranteed to play against the blue opponent in most rounds you're playing. And you get to take advantage of some other cool spells. Another thing is it's playing 4 Civilian of the Sea Sky. That's the god, the merfolk god creature from Modern Horizons 2. This one is 1 blue legendary creature merfolk god 3/4. So 3/4 for 3. It has indestructible as long as you control at least 2 other merfolk, and when it attacks, you draw a card. And then other merfolk you control have ward 1, making it that you have to pay 1 to be able to target them. So this is an additional layer of protection to all your merfolk, while being a really efficient beater that also adds, a card draw engine. They're indestructible. They kind of does so much. And then beyond that, it plays 3 subtlety, but otherwise, it's basically the classic package. You have 4 Lord of the Atlantis, 4 Mercy of the Pearl Trident. Those are the other +1/+1 lords that give island walk. You have a Merfolk Trickster, which lets you do some amount of removal interaction. Silvergill Adept, which lets you draw cards when you play it. And I think just like a combination of just getting the right pieces from the new blue, like the new land that lets you do things, but Vodalian Hexcatcher, Savolin, Subtlety has just given this deck enough legs to be pretty viable right now. And while still being a really good mono blue beatdown deck that's able to just punish people for stumbling. And this could have, once again, Merfolk might be at a point where it is, again, the main aggressive tribal deck in Modern. Now, I think Goblins could be a combo deck, but Merfolk also has the benefit that Fury doesn't punish it as hard for a few reasons. One, it has more ways to interact between Subtlety, just wrecking a Fury. We had Nikachu on talking about Merfolk actually, and they brought up that Subtlety kind of is the Frost Titan of the different free elementals, allowing you to like return them to their controller's hands, but because they've already had to exile a card from their hand, they are so much farther behind than you are, that it kind of puts them on edge. So having Subtlety in this deck, on top of the fact that Vodalian Hexcatcher and Savolin make Fury just like really bad from a mana perspective to be able to really do anything, and all of the lords also pump your creatures, make you pretty resistant to like one of the main things punishing creature decks right now in the format. And so I think this ends up being I think this ends up being just a really powerful strategy in Modern right now. And I'm not surprised that it's starting to have legs now that it has an additional piece of really good interaction. Um, and definitely recommend there are Merfolk experts out there. This list specifically was tweeted by Lord of Atlantis. But then even I believe the person who I saw from was Nikachu retweeting it or quote tweeting it. Yeah, right there. Talking about it getting second place in a Merfolk challenge. And then when you go through MTG Goldfish right now and you look at modern deck lists, which I'm going to just do here really quick, popular decks by metagame, and you go to modern, you go down here, you're just going to see Infect or Merfolk show up more often than we've had seen for a while, which of course I'm going through and there's one. Two. Which, by the way, seeing two of them is a accomplish for Merfolk. Three, and this one got first place in this event. And similar, this is playing Tide Shaper, which lets you mess with the lands of your. Oh, no, this is the one that has Kicker, and allows you to take advantage of the Island Walk. But also just playing this like game. And yeah, one other key piece that often you see play is Spreading Seas, being able to turn lands off. But yeah, Vodalian Hexcatcher has definitely made a big change into like what Merfolk can do in the format. Next, we're talking about Infect. Infect's back. So this list recently hit, got through in a modern preliminary. Is always important to just notice when Infect is around and doing really cool things. This is now the green-black version with Noble Hierarch, allowing you to move out of blue, just using Plague Stinger instead. There's not a lot of flyers in the format right now that like aren't just going to be a problem for Infect regardless, but also being able to get Phyrexian Crusader right now and being able to not have to be dealt with red and white removal, which is some of the most popular versions of it in the format, is really helpful. And you just get better interaction, to be honest, with Thoughtseize as well. Like, I think I'm surprised that Thoughtseize and Infect wasn't adopted more thoroughly early on when, the world when Gitaxian Probe got banned, like, it was very obvious for Grixis Death Shadow decks that like, oh, Thoughtseize is the card we should move into. But for some reason, Infect, and I think part of it is literally just Glistener, just Ignoble Hierarch or Noble Hierarch. Like Noble Hierarch forced Infect to stay in that blue-green world, and being black-green was so much worse because you didn't have the exalted creature that let you pump your spells available in the deck, that moving into black was much harder than it was for Grixis control decks to be able to move into Death Shadow decks. And so it's taken a while, but I'm not surprised that an Infect deck is finally able to start doing things with the Ignoble Hierarch edition. And kind of figuring out what tech it needs. Something like a Gem Razor, which is really cool as a way to use the mutate effect to both have an enchantment removal, but also make your creatures bigger. And playing with just like other just generically good spells that are good. I don't think there's a lot that has changed in what's available to the deck to be able to do well right now than what it was doing in the past. But it has been able to top 8, and I noticed, and I wanted to call out Infect. That's the Infect section. It's a short one. Next, we're going to be talking about Calibrated Blast. Calibrated Blast is a 2-red instant from Modern Horizons 2. Reveal card from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land card. Put the revealed card on the bottom of your library in a random order. When you reveal a non-land card this way, Calibrated Blast deals damage equal to that card's mana value to any target. Flashback 3 red. It plays 4 Calibrated Blasts and then 2 copies of Throes of Chaos, which is 3 red sorcery, has Cascade, and then you can discard lands to retrace it. And then every other card in the deck that's a spell is just big mana. So you're playing Autochron Worm, which is a 10, 11, 12, 13, a 15 CMC Convoke Trample 9/14 Worm. You're playing Volcanic Salvo, which is a 10 red. This spell costs X less, where X is the power of creatures you control, to deal 6 damage to each of the 2 targets. Just a 12 damage dome to the face. And you have Blink Moth Infusion, which is another 14 damage. And then beyond that, you have Commit to Memory, which is kind of one of the more secret techs, where it's Commit to Memory is commit 3 blue instant, put target spell or non-land permanent into its owner's library, second from the top. And then Memory has Aftermath, and each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into the library and draws 7 cards. It's a Time Twister from your graveyard flashback, basically. But because it's a split card, its total CMC is 10. And so basically, if you're able to cast Calibrated Blast in this deck and then flash it back, you kill your opponent at instant speed. And then all you, for a lot of this, all you actually need is just to be able to do 2 additional damage. If, like, in the format, so often you will be, starting at 15 life, and because people will just fetch Thoughtseize you or fetch play cards, and so you really only need to cast it once if you hit an Autochron Worm, or if you hit Blink Moth Infusion, and then you play cards like Raminat Ruins, which are the Raminat Ruins is a land desert. You may tap it and add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You may tap it and pay 1 life to add 1 red to your mana pool, and then you play 2 red, tap it, sacrifice a desert, including itself, to deal 2 damage to each opponent. And so this plus Scorched Desert, which lets you do damage and also is sackable for Raminat Ruins, plus the Mishra's Factory, and all allow you to, and the red land from Kamigawa, all allow you to get like 2 damage into play and to kill them using that damage. And so you're using your lands to just do hopefully just enough more damage that you need to do to be able to kill them above and beyond whatever you were able to Calibrated Blast into. Because basically, you Calibrated Blast, you hope your opponent fetched shocked on turn 1 and 2. Bringing their health down as close to 15 as possible. You Calibrated Blast. Like, your worst case scenario is you hit Throes of Chaos, which still does 4 damage to them, but then you get to flashback Calibrated Blast in 2 turns. But every other hit you have in the deck is just a straight up win condition. And so you just mulligan until you Calibrated Blast, and then you win, which I love this deck a lot too. Cool. Next list. Is Grinding Station. This is by Marine Rush, and is, it's starting off. It's playing a relatively straightforward red-blue beatdown strategy with Ragavan and Ledger Shredder, but then it's playing Emry, Lurker of the Loch, Thassa's Oracle, Teferi Time Reveler for, you're playing a combo deck, the red-blue stuff that you need to get to, but it's playing the Grinding Station, Underworld Breach, Mox Amber, Mishra's Bauble combo. And so the way it works is, while your opponents are paying attention to being beat down by Ragavan and Ledger Shredder, you're building a combo using Emry and trying to get a Grinding Station online. And Grinding Station allows you to sacrifice Mox Amber or Mishra's Bauble to mill yourself 3 cards. And then if you have Underbreach in play, you can then play the 0-drop to this, basically repeat that process. And as long as you have a legendary creature in play, someone like Ragavan or Emry in play, you can use that Mox Amber to be eventually generating mana as you go through this process. Once you generate enough mana to mill your whole deck and then cast a Thassa's Oracle, you win the game. And you can cast Thassa's Oracle from your graveyard using Underworld Breach. So it's like a really cool strategy because you're able to use the Ledger Shredder and Ragavan to keep your opponent on their toes and play the general. They have removal spells, they have good control cards, beat down strategy, and then while they're dealing with that, which is a classic Splinter Twin-like strategy, you're getting to play this value-oriented artifact strategy that eventually leads to you winning the game using Grinding Station and Underworld Breach from a separate direction that they weren't expecting. This deck has kind of, and it's an Urza Saga deck, so it's able to kind of piece together what it's doing. This type of deck has always been on the edges and hasn't really quite gotten yet to being one of the premier decks of the format, but it's really close to being there. It's always on the edge, and literally, especially with us going back to Brothers War and like the chances that there's like a zero, I think the joke going around is that there's been Black Lotus and there's Lotus Petal, and we want a Lotus Stem, which is a 0 mana sacred to make 2 mana, which I don't think will ever be added to Modern, but just like the right card being added to this could be really interesting, and going into the older set right now seems like an opportune moment to see something like that. So those were 4 Modern decks. I realized that the deck I pulled was Pioneer, and we have actually quite a bit of time, so I'm going to move us to doing 2 Pioneer decks next. I got you. I stole. You all are surprised. I also think there's a conversation that some of these decks, especially this next one, would be really interesting to port into Modern, as it's based on new card Sheoldred of the Apocalypse, which has a lot of words on it that seem like it could be pretty dope. So that we're going to talk about that next. So that's the next list. So it's this is a list by Dylan Cruz at Dylan_MTG. And as I said earlier, please go bother and tell them that the people that I've mentioned their deck list, that they're on this episode, and let them know that they're here, and tweet at them any questions you might have. But this is taking advantage of Sheoldred of the Apocalypse, which is a 2 black legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, 4/6, Death Touch. Whenever you draw a card, 4/5, Death Touch. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever your opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. And so it's playing Sheoldred and some basic, red-black control elements: Fatal Push, Thoughtseize. But then it's playing a nice wheel package. So it's playing Dark Deal. It's playing Collected Defiance, which target player discards all cards in their hand, and then they draw that many cards. But it has the ability to do Escalate. So it has a bunch of different other abilities, including some 4 damage to target creature. So it's a utility spell. It's playing Dark Deal, which is discard your hand and draw that many cards -1. It's playing Whispering Madness, 2 blue-black sorcery. Each player discards their hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way, and has Cipher. So basically, it has Windfall, and then you can put this on any creature you control. In this situation, it's Sheoldred, allowing you to attack with Sheoldred, and then Windfall every time you do damage. And then it's playing similar to Sheoldred, it's playing Waste Not. So Waste Not allows you, whenever an opponent discards a creature card, put a 2/2 zombie creature token to play. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, add 2 black mana. And whenever an opponent discards a non-creature, non-land card, draw a card. So it's basically taking advantage of Dark Deal and Collective Defiance, Whispering Madness to be able to trigger Sheoldred or Waste Not in a way that does damage, while just playing those spells that are classically not terrible. One thing I really also love is that it's playing Sign in Blood, which in this deck are really interesting because you can either target yourself to lose, to net 2 life, draw 2 cards, but you can also use it to target your opponent and drain them for 6. Which is kind of an insane play for a useful draw spell that you get to use for most of the time. So something that's really interesting about this list is literally looking it up. Like the amount of decks that are playing Waste Not kind of isn't out there. Like there's no Modern list on all of MTG Goldfish that are playing it. Some other spicy things: it has target player draws cards equal to half the number of cards in their library and lose that half their life rounded up. So it has Peer into the Abyss, 4 black. If you're able to cast that spell, which I think is maybe a little bit of a stretch for Modern, you're able to trigger Sheoldred to gain probably significantly more life than you're losing, or target your opponent and just straight up kill them. It's one of the reasons I think it might still be viable in Modern, is being able to use that to kill your opponent straight up is really good. You have a much better removal suite in Modern as well. You could also, just because so many of the spells you're playing are spells, play something like a Young Pyromancer shell, make this more of a modern Pyromancer Sheoldred list. But Sheoldred does offer, for the first time in Modern even, a redundancy to the incentives created by Waste Not. Previously, Waste Not hasn't had too much incentives. One thing that this deck also isn't playing is Liliana. Now, part of the reason for that is it doesn't really work with Sheoldred, though I think there's an argument that just like Thoughtseize into Dark Confidant, into Liliana, into Sheoldred the Apocalypse, even in Modern being as powerful as it is still really hard for decks to beat. And so I would even maybe think about looking into playing that. But with Whispering Madness, Dark Deal, Collective Defiance, and Sheoldred and Waste Not, you have a shell here that's really interesting. And I love getting to take advantage of stuff like Silent Blood. I realized I didn't read all of the abilities on Collective Defiance. So Collective Defiance is 1 red sorcery, escalate 1, choose 1 or more. Target player discards all cards in their hand, then draws that many cards. If your opponent has, say, 7 cards in hand and you cast this and you have Sheoldred in play, you and just for 3 you deal and say they have a full hand, say they don't have a full hand, say they have 5 cards in hand, you will deal 10 damage to them on turn 5. If you spend 1 more mana, you'll deal 13 damage because you can Collective Defiance deals 3 damage to target opponent, and then it has the removal spell of Collective Defiance deals 4 damage to target creature. So it has versatility there, which I think is interesting. The card I was thinking of also playing is Reforge the Soul. Reforge the Soul is 3 red. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws 7 cards, but it has Miracle 1 red. So I think there's a version of this list. I almost want to say there's like a cool red, black, blue Miracles version of this list that you're playing Reforge the Soul and Jace, the Mind Sculptor, as an additional option to be able to get into stuff. And obviously Jace works really well with Sheoldred because you're able to trigger those draw card effects. So I think that's a different beneficial way to kind of play around in this space. All right. The last deck we're going to talk about is a blue-black control list for Pioneer. It's based on, it's playing 1 Tasigur, but it's really based on just there's a lot of really good spells in Pioneer that let you do control lists. I want to talk about it. It's playing Urtai, it's playing Torrential Gearhulk, it's playing Dig Through Time, it's playing a bunch of different counter spells, it's playing Search for Azcanta. It's like one of the most Andrew Brown control decks I've ever seen. It's playing Shark Typhoon, and it's your standard control deck. It's not doing anything specifically spicy. I just saw that this was a viable archetype in Pioneer and am just like really hyped about that. And this is probably my second deck I'm thinking of building in the format, especially because I have a lot of these cards. I'm just not using them. Urtai is one card I do think that has been a really interesting addition to the format. It's seeing more play, I think, than people were giving it original credit, or at least I guess the main response I saw to Urtai is that it's overrated, but Urtai is the new card from Dominaria United, 2 blue-black legendary creature, Phyrexian human wizard. Flash when it enters the battlefield, choose up to 1. It's a 3/2. Counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. Its controller draws a card. Destroy another target creature or planeswalker. Its controller does a card. It just does a lot. And, in the fashion of Vendilion Click, letting your opponent draw a card ends up not being that powerful, especially when you're stopping something that you are much more worried about. And the fact that it can hit activated abilities or triggered abilities also means that you're able to like hit a Thassa's Oracle trigger, or stop a fetch land, or stop something that they maybe like a Planeswalker ultimate, something that was a lot harder for them to earn to get to. So when there's that buildup with one of those and being able to benefit off of it, worst case scenario, killing something, it's really beneficial. Beyond that, just like being able to play this type of control deck, I think like a blue-black classic Andrew Brown winning style control deck hasn't really been viable in Modern. I don't think ever. It's one of the strategies that you'd think would have a higher chance. Now, part of that is that it's so easy to splash colors that you're just going to end up in Esper or Grixis, and Grixis control decks have been super viable, and I think that's where you'll end up being, giving the ability to loop stuff. But I would be interested to see if there could ever be incentives to play less colors in the format, which brings us kind of back to the original point, which is, what does Modern look like with Wasteland unbanned? Right now, Modern is a format where mana bases can be really greedy, and the format is starting to become so widespread in which colors are played. Does Wasteland offer anything? And that's the big question, because I'm going to end on here. What do you think the format looks like with Wasteland added to Modern, not unbanned, just printed into Modern? Does the format get worse? Does decks like Delver and Ragavan become too powerful, which I do think is the negative, or does the format become a little bit healthier because these 5-color decks aren't as easy to splash? Beyond that, once again, thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our producers for editing this podcast and dealing with me being by myself. Make sure that like and subscribe button, and make sure to comment below if you think Wasteland should be unbanned in Modern. If you're not following me, make sure to follow me on TikTok. I do a bunch of Magic content there. I'm also doing a bunch of One Piece content there. I'm getting really hyped for all the new anime that's coming out this October. I'll be talking about that a lot. Also, if you are not a part of our Discord, we have a bunch of cool micro format stuff. We're also going to start doing more Pioneer content, so let us know which deck list you want us to review there, or any creators you'd like to see guests on the podcast. I'm Alex Kessler, your host, and we have co-hosts like Ben Bateman and Michael Grothy and Marshall James, and thank you to our editors as well, Rick Scharnhorst, and we will talk to all of you next week when we have the full crew back.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.